Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello and welcome to An Unconventional Life. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Strickland, the founder and CEO of Dissertation Done. And I have with me today Dr. Fergus Connolly. Dr. Connolly is a high-performance coach. He has worked with folks in business, in pro sports, and other things. I'm very interested in sharing the story with you guys. Welcome, Dr. Connolly.
Thank you very much for having me. I wish I had met you many years ago when I was doing my own dissertation. I could have done with some help getting it done, getting it over the line.
Well, I wish people didn't keep telling me that. I wish they had met me when.
Well, but, now you can make a big difference to a lot of people.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that reminds me to let you guys know that this episode today is brought to you by Dissertation Done. So if you are a doctoral student, whether you are getting ready to approach the dissertation project, you are already in the midst of it, maybe you're feeling like you're a little slowed, stalled, or just plain stuck, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done, and we'll talk to you, see if you might be a good fit for our Fast Track Your Dissertation coaching program. And if maybe you've already earned your doctoral degree, or you're out there operating in the expert space as a coach, counselor, consultant, the best place to, or the best way to expand your authority and to bring potential customers, clients, and patients to your door is by becoming a published author. And we help folks go from the blank page to a published book in less time than you thought you might need. And you can reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/book to find out more about that. So again, Dr. Connolly, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
So as I mentioned before we began recording, one of the ways that we like to kind of begin this process of talking to folks is to find out really your backstory. And for us, that kind of starts with what made you decide to pursue a doctoral degree. We've met lots of people that do fun and interesting things with them, and I'd love to talk about that. But I want to find out what got you on this path in the first place.
I guess there are lots of people who start out and have a clear idea, what they want to do. I didn't. My father was a woodwork and a construction studies teacher. And so at 16, 17 in Ireland, obviously that's where the accent comes from, but back in Ireland, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I thought, okay, I'll go and do the same thing as he was doing. Yeah. But I started school a little bit earlier than others because we had moved house. It wasn't that it was bright, actually. It was probably the opposite. Had to work harder. But I had my degree finished I just turned 21. And I felt that I had the opportunity to go and do a Ph.D. And I felt that was the best time for me back then to do it. And I knew it was going to be a challenge. I knew it was going to be a journey. But I personally felt I wouldn't have had the mindset to go back. And so when I heard about this thing called a PhD, which I didn't really understand, but I liked the idea of being able to do something on my own without it just being very structured. And that excited me. So in order for me to do it, actually at the time, I had to do a master's first, a taught master's first to transition from an education degree to an engineering degree, and then do a PhD. And it was exciting. It was, I really enjoyed it. Now there were tough moments, and I learned a lot doing it. And when I reflect back on it, I realized the benefit of doing it actually more now than I did at the time, and certainly immediately afterwards as well. I didn't realize the things that it had taught me.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, the very first thing that you said was the fact that you were interested in, you were kind of hooked by the fact that there was not so much structure, that you were able to do what you wanted to do. And a lot of our folks look at that as a double-edged sword. So yes, you have flexibility, but then you have to figure everything out, and no one's leading you through the process.
No, that's a good point. And it's not that you're abandoned either, but that you have within, it's kind of like having, a a wild horse in a field. There are boundaries, but
Right.
within that, then you've got that little bit of latitude, and that's a very good point, because in order to get through it, and I've had different people who've been, who I've come across in my career who are in the middle of PhDs, and I always enjoy speaking to them about what they're doing, and they all go through the same struggles. And there's almost like a moment. There is always a moment for everybody where it feels like you've got those 40 days, 40 nights in the wilderness, and you're completely lost. That hits everybody doing a PhD at some stage, and sometimes just explaining to people that's okay, that's going to come. That's important. So you need good mentors, and you need good people around you who've been through the process to help you through it.
Two very, very important points. Number one, that's one of the reasons why I have this podcast, is I want to make sure that doctoral students realize that you're not the only one going through the struggles in this process. So many people will see what the output looks like, what folks look like when they're confident after they've graduated and they've gotten several months or a few years of experience under their belts. And it's a very different situation. You feel different than you do as a student. But as a student, everybody hits those moments of struggle, whether they feel like they're the entire program or you're just stuck somewhere for a little while. Everybody seems to hit those moments of struggle. And so for so many of our students and so many folks that are listening to this podcast, you aren't surrounded with a community of other students, because our folks are adults, right? They're working in their careers, they're taking care of their families, paying their mortgage. They're not in a basement office somewhere with a bunch of graduate students seeing the struggles and seeing what it's like to do the work. And so I really appreciate you mentioning that, because it's true, and the more people they hear that from, the better.
Yeah, and it's funny, I started working and doing my PhD at the same time. So, and it was on campus, but not in the university. So I wasn't surrounded by a bunch of graduate students. And I'll be honest with you, if I was, I'm not sure I would have ever gotten it done, because it actually suited me better not to be in, and for different reasons, I think. And so, people who are not in that environment, there are some blessings as well. I know it can be difficult. Sometimes you feel you're alone,
right.
But there are a lot of benefits. And the most important, the key to it is to figuring out your process, what works for you.
Right.
And that might be it's going to be different for everybody. But first of all, acknowledging it's okay to be different. It's okay to figure out your schedule. And secondly, then knowing that it's going to be varied and it's going to be chaotic. Once you accept those things, which usually for some people happens too late for them, but once you accept those things, you start to enjoy the chaos of it and the challenge of it.
Or you might start to enjoy the chaos.
Well, I think there are difficult moments, but I always stress to people that's the learning part. Yeah. Like if it was easy, you're not going to get anything from it, and so expect that there's going to be difficult moments, but just stop yourself and remind yourself, this is the good part. This is what I'm going to look back on and benefit from.
And you mentioned, I had mentioned earlier, there were two things that you had said before. One about, everybody hitting these moments of struggle, but then you also said that you have to have good mentors, good support structures. And then you said right after that, you enjoyed working on it alone. How did those two concepts intersect for you?
I think what works well for me is being able to have, and this is something I've learned over the years, not just doing my PhD, but other things, is having good mentors who, and we can talk about that in a minute, but having them that I can go and lean on and then go back and do my own work and take responsibility for it, then bring it forward again, but not to be overly reliant on people, because that's not, you have to take responsibility for your own work. So understanding that. And so that's, I think, the most important, for me anyway, that's what works well for me, is having good mentors that you can go to and present, what you're doing, and people who understand both the professional and personal challenges. So they understand that there are times, there's a phrase in Ireland where, slap on the back is 6 inches from a kick in the ass. But like sometimes you need to be clapped on the back. Sometimes you need to be slapped, just to motivated. And if you've got a good mentor, they know which not what you want, but what you need at that moment in time. But they're always there for you.
And so when you said good mentor a little bit earlier, it sounded like there was a story there. Did you?
Well, I had I want to be careful, but I had good, I had good supervisors, but I also had very good mentors outside in the university, people who had gone through it and people who knew what I was going through. Because yes, a PhD is a professional thing, or it's it in itself, but there's a lifestyle as well that you have to manage. And so if you've got kids, or if you're married, or you've got relationships, it's going to be tough. So you need people who can understand that as well and can help you. I remember there was, I was pushing myself quite hard. I remember one morning, I think breakfast was a can of Red Bull and a Snickers bar, and I remember one of my mentors saying to me, "Hey, let's go for coffee. We need to have a talk here. This is, you're just pushing it a little bit too hard. You need to find balance."
Yeah.
And that's important, that you have good, like I said, good people who see not just in terms of word count, but understand you have to come up with a good process and a good strategy to get through this in the long term.
Yeah, and that's so important. I've mentioned on the podcast before, one of my early students at Dissertation done, her project was on the types of support that adult doctoral students need to graduate. So folks who are completing their dissertation remotely away from the university community, what do they need? And you mentioned the idea of someone telling you what to do, the operational aspect. And obviously you need that, but you also need someone that's thinking about you as not just a doctoral student, but as a person. There's an emotional roller coaster that goes through this process of people doubting themselves and not thinking that they can't do it. Imposter syndrome. Who am I to be here with all of these brilliant people that they might see around them? Or if they're remote, they're just kind of imagining what other people are doing. Most of us had a fairly easy time in school up until we got to a doctoral degree program. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have gotten to a doctoral degree program. But then we start to struggle and we think, well, everybody else is out there doing just fine. And so emotionally having someone to kind of help check you through all of those ups and downs is really, really important as well. And that needs to be someone who's been through the process. You can get emotional support from your family who doesn't know anything about a doctoral degree process necessarily, but that's not going to be enough. You also need someone who has been there, who can give you that kind of salient support as well, not just.
Yeah, that's important. And I wish that I had also had somebody sit me down at the beginning and explain to me what some of the stages that I would go through, because there are some that, and they may not always be in the same order, but there will be times when you feel as though you've gone down a rabbit hole and you can't see the light, and somebody has to tell you this is okay, you're still on the right path.
Right.
You're also right about I remember being and it's embarrassing to say, but being short with family and friends, and basically saying, like, I mean, they were, having sympathy for what I was doing, but again, I was countering with, well, you just don't understand.
Right.
And and that's difficult as well, because sometimes you just don't have the energy to explain when you should, and taking the time to be able to explain to them that it's going to be tough. And what is the beauty and the difficulty of doing a dissertation or going on a journey is it is one of the longest undertakings you will take, apart from marriage. But like, I mean, it's a long journey. This isn't like it's not like a 2-week fad diet.
Right.
This is a long journey. And so it's good to have somebody that you can sit down with, talk you through, steel you for it. In other words, just prepare you for it, so that when those moments come, that to expect them, and that it's not unusual. And that's very important.
Yeah. And another thing, when you're talking about how long the journey is, I mean, for a lot of students, it's very, very long. And that's what I do with students at Dissertation Done is I work with folks who want to get done quickly, not because they're cheating or shortcutting the process, but because that's their goal, is to graduate and go on to do other things. Some students, their goal is to continue to research for the rest of their lives. And in that case, it's really just a matter of what you call it when you're a PhD student versus a postdoc versus, a junior faculty member. And so they don't care that one phase might take longer than the other. And that's very common in academia. So if you are going to be in a position where your goal is to graduate as soon as possible, make sure that your mentors are aware of that and that they are on board with that. You might get a mentor who will say, that's just not the way things are done. It has to take a long time or else. And that might not be the best fit for you. So make sure that as you're going through this journey, preparing for it, that you're intentional about what your goals are and what outcomes you want to achieve.
Yeah, that's very important because, I know that, I had colleagues who were hell bent on getting it done as fast as necessary, let's say, rather than possible. They wanted to get it done. But again, I would see their supervisors who didn't, it made no difference to them personally.
Right.
Even if funding ran out, it didn't make, so the urgency wasn't there. And that would have been a very helpful conversation to have early on to go and to at least have clarity. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't work with a supervisor like that, but you need to be able to acknowledge that, or at least have that conversation and know that that's how they operate. I've got a good friend who's struggling at this moment with that very same scenario where there's a supervisor who doesn't have the same urgency as they do. And it's tough. It's very tough on them because they're coming with, a very diligent approach, and it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And, I think that's an important conversation to have, so that it's not that you can't do it, you can do it, but you need to have that clarity and understanding.
You're right. And just to be clear with everybody that's listening or watching, when I say as fast as reasonably possible, it's still a long journey. I mean, for our students, a year is kind of the goal that we tend to shoot for. Some of them exceed that goal and they finish quicker. Many of them take a little bit longer, but that's just I think a good benchmark, a good goal to shoot for. However, when you are, if that is your priority, if that's what you're doing, I ask people always consider when you're making a big change or taking a big step in life, what's your why? What's the reason why you decided to do that? If your reason why is, well, I need to get out of school so I can do this other thing, then make sure that strategically what you're doing aligns with that. And part of that is the conversation you have with your mentor. If you have the opportunity to interview your mentors, you're choosing your mentors, which you can do at many schools, then that should be part of the criteria that you use, not the best or most famous or whatever mentor, but the one who can help you with your goals, whatever they are, whether they're getting done quickly or doing award-winning research or anything in between.
Yeah, and also, life happens and your why might change slightly, so you might lengthen it, and that's okay. That's good. Yes. But again, like you said, knowing what your why is, and when you're clear about that, look, in order to do lots of things, or in order to do anything, there's some element of sacrifice, or there's some element of self-denial. But when you're clear about your why, then you know what you want, choose not to do in order to get this done. And that's so important to have that clearly understood. And also, when it comes to relationships and family, explaining that to them as well, because then they understand, then they can be supportive.
Because I don't know how many students I've talked to who said, my family just doesn't understand this at all. I go to the family reunions, the barbecues, the picnics, whatever, and they're like, why are you doing this? You're 30 years old, or you're 40 years old, or whatever. Mm-hmm. Why are you in school? And the person, well, you can get offended by that, quite honestly. I mean, if you're not careful, you have to be able to just have a reason that people can understand and that you can communicate to other folks, whether they're family or professionally or whatever it might be.
Yeah, like you need to know your why, but you also need to have what's the line, like an elevator pitch. You need to have a one line that you can explain to people quickly. Yeah. And if they want to know more, you can tell them more, but it does help to be able to explain. The other thing that I think is very helpful is having the conversation with a mentor early on, so that they ask you all of the challenging questions
Mhm.
that you may not be aware of,
Right.
because it's not to dissuade you, it's actually to reinforce your why, so that you are clear about it. Because if you don't ask those questions early on, when the difficult moments come, you won't have steeled yourself for those, and just to reinforce that why and that clarity.
That's true. Don't necessarily think that just because a mentor is questioning your why or anything like that, that they are doubting you or they are trying to dissuade you. It could be that they're just trying to make sure that you're comfortable, you're confident, you understand your process and your reasons why. I'll do that with kids a lot when we're doing schoolwork. They might give me the right answer, and I'll ask them if they're sure. And if they waver or if they change their answer, then I know we've got an issue. We got to think about it some more. But if they can come back and say yes, no, that's the answer, then we'll move on.
Yeah, I do it with a lot of clients in questioning, so that I can truly understand where their why is coming from. Because then when things get difficult, you know how to motivate them, and motivate's the wrong word, but you know how to remind them. And so the more that you understand, the person that you're working with, the easier it is to support them. And because the clearer you understand their why, where it's coming from, and how they see it impacting them later. And that's why it's critical.
Yeah, even if that person you're working with is you, you have to understand. But that actually is a good segue, because I mentioned one of the reasons why I have this podcast is to help people understand what it's like going through this doctoral journey, to know that you're not alone in this process, but also to motivate people, to inspire people about the incredible opportunities that are out there after you graduate. And I don't care how well you planned out, you thought about your why and planned out what you want to do after you graduate. I have met so many folks who are doing so many interesting things, and they tell me there's no way I thought I would be doing this when I was in school. This thing didn't exist as far as I was concerned. I didn't know about it. Whatever, opportunities just arise. And the point that you made earlier about your why maybe changing is absolutely valid. The why can change, or the how can change. And so I'd love for you to share kind of what's happened, what you've been up to since you've graduated, because that notion of all the things you can do with a doctoral degree, I think is very inspirational to folks who are still working on the process.
Yeah, so I coach high performers or elite performers mostly in the corporate world, still some in sport. And, I've consulted in special operations community and with high performers in a number of different groups. But initially, I was planning to be a woodwork construction studies teacher in high school. My master's was in advanced manufacturing. My Ph.D. was in computer-based optimization. So that gives you an idea of going from way over here to something completely different. Now, for me personally, the exposure to, from a process perspective, the detail, being able to structure and write, those are incredible skills that I still use today, whether it's a proposal or a report or an audit. I still use very much the same style. Those skill sets are invaluable. The skill set that I actually find most useful is being able to be concise and really clinical with my writing. But there's so many other ones. I know that, I understand that if I'm working on something and there goes a lag where I'm not getting a lot done, sometimes I just need to go back to the skills that I learned writing my dissertation, and that was just to process through a set amount of time, and then it comes. Understanding that I call them waves. Sometimes there's a wave that's going to come, and you just, like last Saturday and Sunday, even during the Super Bowl, I was on a wave. I was able to get a lot done when, on the Friday before I just didn't. So just understanding how you function. But for me,
and you learn a lot about that process in the doctoral degree process, right? There's this kind of the crucible that forges the strength that we have after we graduate.
Yeah, and also understanding that, when there are deadlines and how you work best. For me personally, then just the exposure to different areas. So for example, from a technology perspective, while I was doing it, I got a great insight, a great understanding. But I truly believe that more so now than ever before, the most important skill is adaptability. And in order to be adaptable, you need to have a range of skills. Doing a PhD is going to force you, whether you like it or not, to learn new skills. And that's a good thing. Now, at the time, we don't see it and it's uncomfortable and we're doing something different. But when you get it done, you've learned your toolbox that I talk about has more tools in it. So no matter what the scenario is, you will have tools to help you adapt to that opportunity that comes along. And for me, that's critical, because things, when people become comfortable, and so there's probably people thinking about, oh, should I do a dissertation or not? And when you become too comfortable and something changes, now you're out of your comfort zone. But if you can, just even going through the process of doing a dissertation, getting out of your comfort zone, struggling, once you get through that, there's very few things in life that are going to come at you that you're not going to be able to solve later on. And then you've got a whole new set of skills. You've got expertise in an area, and you've got knowledge.
It's from working at something, being uncomfortable, maybe failing in some sense of the word. You didn't accomplish things the way you wanted. It took longer than you wanted, whatever the case might be. But I firmly believe that the only true failure is quitting. Deciding you want to do something else is okay, because again, like we mentioned before, sometimes your priorities change. But if this is what you want to do and you just give up on it, that's the only real failure. Anything less than that is you learning, adapting, overcoming, and becoming more and more confident as you go.
Yeah, and the other thing too, and this is the irony, you'll finish your PhD and shortly afterwards you look back and you go, man, I could have done that better, I could have done that. Right. It's a good thing, but that's what's going to happen. There's a good friend of mine that I work with at Google. She just finished a brilliant book on building for everyone, diversity and inclusion. But we were just talking, like, she's just published it, but even she's looking back and going, there's things that I could change now, but that's what's going to happen. But that again is something, that's a trait that you will learn, that you're always going to try and do things better and get them better. And those are good skills to learn.
And I actually look at the flip side of that too. I think it's a good skill to learn when to cut things off and get them out into the world, because so many folks that are going to a doctoral program have this sort of perfectionism gene that they have to contend with. And I know I'm a recovering perfectionist. I work on it every day. There are things that I look at and I know I can do that better. But if I get it out into the world, most of the people that I would be publishing that thing for, that I would be putting that thing out into the world for, will appreciate it. Most of them might not even notice the shortcomings, but even if they do, they're going to see that there's 80% good and 20% could be better, or 90% good and 10% could be better. And that's still an overwhelming benefit to the people that you're out there trying to help. And so for a lot of folks, that's what they have to learn, is how to say, this is good enough. Let's get it out into the world. We might make it better later, or we might do something else that's good and get that out into the world later. But if we're just iterating on one thing, nothing ever happens. We don't make the world any better.
Yeah, there's a concept. It's a good book that I read a number of years ago called the efficiency thoroughness trade-off. Mm-hmm. In other words, it has to be effective, right? But it has to be efficient, and it has to be thorough. But there's a trade-off between that in order for it to work,
right?
And and like you said, that's a tough realization, but it's very important in life as well. It has to work, and you have to get it over the line. You have to accomplish something. There's still with the knowledge that everything could always be better, and that perfectionist mindset is a good thing. It's a good thing to learn, because if you go on and you publish anything or you do anything, you have to acknowledge that you're doing your best at that moment in time, but it's never going to be perfect. That's right. But you're going to strive for it.
And that's the trade-off. That's the balance, is that you can do something that you can say is your best, while you know that it's not perfect. You could conceivably do better by making it perfect, but in a reasonable time limit, with a reasonable amount of resources, this is the best I can do. And I shouldn't devote more than that time and those resources to this project, because if I do, then they're not paying out the benefit that they should. For example, they're not out in the world helping other people. So many, I mean, companies are really good with this. Apple, for example, is constantly, when they put out something new, it's good enough, and it works. It's not that it's bad, it certainly works, but they add to it and it works better, and it gets better with iterations later on. But still, it's out there helping people right away. As soon as they can get it reasonably to market, that's what they do. And that's what we should do with our ideas as well, whatever that takes, whatever form that takes. If it's services that you produce or a book that you want to write or whatever it is, get it out there so that it's good enough to help people. Don't put it out there with a bunch of grammatical mistakes and wrong ideas. But once it's right and it works, and then it's good enough to help people, get it out there. And if you want to, you can always publish a second edition or do an add-on service later, or whatever the case might be. But that notion of fighting perfectionism and doing good work, but getting it out into the world, I think is really important.
No, and if you're doing a PhD, I think one of the, and I struggled with this as well, was, look, if you're doing a PhD already, you already have a high standard. So don't think
Right.
that you're not saying to people produce something poorly. That's not,
right.
It's not that at all. The other point about that is, I don't believe you can do that on your own. I think you need a reference. I think you need somebody who can help you, because, and I do it all the time. I go to people on different projects, and sometimes it's on huge pieces of paper, and I'm putting it in front of them going, do you think this is is this good enough? Or, and I have different phrases like, break this for me. As in, like, why is it not good enough? And if it is, okay, let's move forward with it.
Right.
But I need people to look at things and to critique it.
Yeah.
And that's a really good quality to have, is to be able, again, to get used to taking critiques and criticism of your work.
Yeah, and I appreciate when you say that you got to go out and get other people's feedback. That, I think that's really important, because if you, as you mentioned, when you're in a PhD program, you have high standards. For a lot of folks that I work with, their standards are actually higher than their university standards, and so just get it done. Don't necessarily mean that it's got to stay to your standards. If your school's telling you this will do, then do it. And when I talk about that in the context of a dissertation, it's often people want to add on pieces. I want to not just do one or two things, but I want to do 10 or 20 things. And for a dissertation, you don't have to do all of that. You can focus on something fairly narrow, do that, do it well, and then move on. But whatever the case might be, it's just important that you can take that feedback, whether it's from your dissertation committee or someone else in the marketplace, and understand what good enough is, produce that, get it out the door, and get it to helping people, whether it's helping you to graduate or it's helping other people in the marketplace.
Yeah, you see, the unique thing about it is you've never done it before, so
Right.
you don't know. It's not like an exam or something else. Like, you've generally done one before, so you have an idea. So knowing what's relevant, knowing what to put in, knowing what not to. The other thing too is it's obviously very personal to you.
Right.
So you that's why you tend to want to do more. And then there's also, like you said, there's imposter syndrome. You do a lot of work and then you go, hang on, I'm only putting this much in, but I've done all this other work that I need to show them how much I've done.
Right.
And a lot of that comes down to, to your supervisor or not, but knowing as well what you should do and what's important to put in. Those things are critical.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Well, tell me, Fergus, tell me a little bit about the work that you have been doing since. You mentioned that you're coaching folks, high performance individuals, corporate and elsewhere. Do you have any kind of stories of things that you've helped folks with that maybe you would not have been able to do before you had completed your doctoral degree?
Yeah, like my very first job was in professional sport in the Premier League, and at the time, there was the start of sports science and monitoring and tracking players, which was very new. I had an interest in sport. I'd worked with different coaches, but it was my PhD and my expertise in computers and understanding how to apply technology in it was in manufacturing, but being able to combine those two things, there wasn't anybody else in the world at the time was able to do, or had that experience and was able to apply it in sport. And so from there, working in rugby, soccer, in the NFL, and implementing different technologies, like when I was with San Francisco 49ers, we were the first to start monitoring and tracking players. So all of the data that you see now with distance run, we had that on the practice field. But again, if you just go down a particular vertical of sport and performance, you can't, and you don't understand technology, you can't make the two things work together. And for me, that was the beauty of my dissertation. My work was, and I strongly believe that people who work in this gap between paradigms and where paradigms meet, that's where the greatest progress is made. Yeah. So people who have life experience and want to study a particular area generally are going to contribute a lot more than if it's just been in one specific specialized area alone. And so that means getting uncomfortable. It means you're going to be out of your comfort zone, but that's where the greatest growth is. It's not been plain sailing. I remember one time spent a lot of money putting educational posters on the wall for recovery. And I remember it was actually Colin Kaepernick called. He said, "Hey, what's this?" And when we had spent the money we designed, we'd put them up, and I had put the temperatures in European metrics, not in US metrics. So all of the numbers had to be changed and at a significant cost. So even despite all of those things, you're still going to make mistakes, but you got to learn from them. But I think
that's where, like you're talking before, feedback is so valuable. If Colin Kaepernick had just looked at it before it went to press.
Yeah, or actually in that case, if I'd asked somebody else to look at it first before we'd even done that, it wouldn't have even got as far as a player. But again, you're always going to make mistakes. Just don't make the same one twice. That's the important thing. But again, the value of the dissertation, I probably underestimated it a lot early on. And in hindsight, again, even simple things like just writing a report, being clinically knowing what to leave out. I did an audit for an NFL team a few months ago, and again, it would read very much like my dissertation structure, and the system, the processes, the conclusion, how to sum it up. Honestly, it would be I would not have been able to do it if I had not done the dissertation.
And I think that's one of those things where I ask my students to learn this as soon as possible. You need some professional detachment with the dissertation process. You mentioned this idea of it being deeply personal to you. That does tend to hold folks back if they're interested in finishing their dissertation. Because if this is something that's deeply personal to you, you're going to have that perfectionist problem cropping up over and over again. You want to make sure you do it just right and you do it your way, and lots of things that get in the way of progress with the doctoral program when your dissertation is too personal to you. So when you learn professional detachment, then that helps you to see what's important, what's relevant, what do I need to put out there, and I don't have to worry about everything else and all the things that we did to get to the point where we could create this report. Here's the report. This is what you need to know. And that's what I'm giving you, not everything I could give you, everything I do know. I'm giving you what you need to know.
Yeah, and that goes back to your why. Like, why are you doing it?
Right.
Once you refine that and you're clear about it, then you can detach from it. But again, like I said, you'll make the mistake. I did myself. Like, this is personal to me. I'm gonna go lettering on it, and it's my baby, and you spend so much time in it. But sometimes you lose track of what your why is and why you're doing it. And you just need to remind yourself of that in order to be clinical and cold about it, to detach yourself. And that's not a bad thing, because if you become too attached to it, and you have to remember as well that you aren't writing this for you. You're writing this for somebody else that's going to read it. So you need to consider what they're going to read, and what they're interested, what they really want to get from this in order to be able to approve it.
And that's true in a professional setting, but it's also true with your dissertation. Whatever your committee needs to see in order for them to be happy with it and for them to approve it, that's your job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's what's going to determine it's, and it's not what you think. You know what I mean? It's not
Right.
what you think is important. It's what they think. Your supervisor or your that's what matters. And keeping that in your mind is
I tell
important.
students all the time, your name is on the author sheet, your name's on the title cover page, but it's not your dissertation, it's your committee's dissertation. This
Yes.
is a thing that you're creating specifically for them. I mean, think about it as like a bespoke suit or something like that, a custom made, tailor-made suit, or a custom built house. It's got to be exactly what they want. And when it is, they're going to be happy with it and they'll give you your degree. But until then, they're going to have all these little complaints. And if you want to fight them on what they want, you're just going to find that process is going to be deeply frustrating, and it draws it out for a long period of time. But if you can get behind this notion of my job is to give them what they want, then you'll find that you make it through that process with a lot less scars.
Yeah, and the sooner you realize that, the easier the journey is going to be. The other thing I think that's important is, it was a Lincoln or the Washington quote about if I had 7 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 5 sharpening the axe.
Yeah,
take your time. Yeah, so take your time in with your supervisor or whoever in planning what the stages are. Be secure in them and tick them off, and know that the actual dissertation you'll get that done. But just once you've got that plan, your why, you've got the plan, stick to it, and you'll get through it, rather than rushing into it and then having to restructure afterwards.
Absolutely. Let me ask you before we close today, is there another success story that you think you could share, professionally, just to not to toot your own horn, because I know that that's something that's difficult for most of us, but to share with other folks what it's like to be able to work in this environment with your doctoral degree. You don't have to share any names with us, but any clients where they had a particular issue and you were able to get them a great win, whatever it might be that you just felt like you were particularly happy with as a result of being able to work here with your doctoral degree.
Well, so one of the things that I struggled with was an imposter syndrome, particularly working in a different field than my degree had been in, my PhD had been in. And I remember working with a professor who I'd brought in, a physiologist, and we were working on a particular project. And I remember saying to him, maybe I should go back and do another PhD in physiology. And he said to me, not at all. He said, you have proven that you can research, and you've proven that you can pay attention to detail. You've proven that you can do. That's the skill set. Those are the skills that we want to see. And so that happened, a few years after my PhD, and I spent some time thinking about it. And he's right. Like, it's those skills. When people see that you have done that dissertation, yes, it will open up doors. Yes, you've proven that you can go through that process, that you can be accurate, that you can be diligent, that you can be focused, that you can be disciplined. And those are the things that translate. So, when you have a dissertation done, you've gone through that process, you've proven that you can do certain things. So it does open doors. It in itself, regardless as to what the topic might be, which is obviously valuable, but the fact that you've gone through that process, has helped certainly many times. Absolutely.
Yeah, most of the folks that you're going to work with who do not have their doctoral degree, they don't even really consider the notion of what your doctoral degree specialty is. If your first name is doctor, they're deferring to you, they're asking you questions, they're going to consider you an expert on anything that you choose to open your mouth about. So you just have to be respectful of that power that you wield, and make sure that you're giving them advice in areas that you feel confident to give that advice. But for some people, you need to get a second.
No, and I think one of the values of doing the PhD is that you learn how to think critically.
Yep.
And so if you've gone through the process, you've been humbled, there's no doubt. So you generally come through with a sense of humility and an ability to critically think. So you're a lot more careful about, again, wielding that power, so to speak.
Right.
And you tend to give you tend to give better advice because it's not absolutist. And you have the other thing, of course, is, today there's more research out there than ever before, but you're able to decipher that and to give more valuable insight as well to people across the board, regardless as to the area.
The fact, what you mentioned about there being so much more research out there, one of the things that you learn in a doctoral degree program is how to learn. Some people pick that up a little earlier, but certainly by the time you get through a doctoral degree program, you've learned how to learn. Now, what are you going to learn about next? Because I hope everyone listening to this, everyone that has ears, I hope, is trying to learn something new every day. And certainly our folks who've earned their doctoral degrees, I would put front and center in that group. And so it's just a question as to what you're learning about now. You can specialize in things that had nothing to do with your formal education fairly quickly if you want to, because that notion of knowing how to learn is, I think, another very critical skill to the list that you've been developing.
No, I actually, that's a really important point, and I don't want to go on about it, but to me, that's the most important skill in education. Is not the topic, but it's learning how to learn about something new and learning how to explore it, getting interested in it, and being able to teach yourself. And that's something that I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole of rote learning that happens at lower levels in education now that seems to be just the standard, but that's not going to work at the dissertation level. That is the most important skill set for anybody, and even with all of the people that I work with now, that's the skill that helps them survive, because they're always going into new environments, into new situations. They have to keep learning. So if they have that ability to teach themselves, they're going to continue. It's not about what you can remember or recall. It's can you continue to learn and to teach yourself. And so when you're faced with something new in a new area, you have the confidence to know, I don't know about it, but I can learn how to learn about that.
Absolutely. And that notion of confidence, having done something before, is where confidence comes from. But then confidence teaches you that you can do new things that you haven't done before. When you have learned how to do something that you weren't able to do in the past, then you feel like you can learn how to do something new that you might need to in the future. So critical positive feedback loop for progress and development. I noticed that you had recently given a TEDx talk. Would you like to share with folks a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that was I did a TED. I think it was about 2 years ago now, but that was about, again, that was about failure and about screwing up, and that was another opportunity to learn, having made a mistake, and also the importance of having mentors and having people around you that you can rely on, because it was something that I had neglected, not having people around. And I think, again, just like doing a dissertation, you need to have people who are on those fences that can help reference you and help you get through those difficult moments. And I had good people doing my dissertation at different stages, but sometimes you let that slip, and you need to have good people around you to be able to help you, navigate those trying times, those difficult times.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a real testament to you when you're able to share with people, as you have today, about mistakes that you've made, because we all make them. You learn from them, and you learn how to leverage those things to do better in the future. But to have the confidence to be able to lay those things bare in front of people after the fact, that shows a real strength of character that I think is really admirable as well, and something we should all work towards.
Yeah, well, I think that going through a PhD, because of the duration and it's a sustained stressor,
right?
If you can, it's not if you can get through it. But the beauty of it is there will be difficult, dark moments, but you're going to get through it. And you're not, like you said earlier, the only thing you can do, the worst thing you can do is stop, quit.
Right.
Like that's the only thing. So you have to stick. And I have no problem admitting there were times doing my PhD took three years. There were plenty of times I thought, briefly, briefly. I quit. I'm going to quit. I'm not going to make it through this, or I'm going to opt out. And I would wake up the next morning and just go get back into it again. Just like, you mean, I always say to people, you're allowed to think about it just for a brief second and then just get on with it.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty, because everybody's going to have difficult moments in life, but you have to force yourself just to stick at it and get through it. The worst thing you can do is either ignore it or blame someone else. That's my philosophy. If you screw up, if you make a mistake, accept it, learn from it, move on. Just don't make it twice. Then it's a real mistake.
And that notion that you mentioned about, contemplating quitting or contemplating giving up, I do think everybody reaches those moments. I tell folks that you're going to be up late one night and you're going to look in the mirror and ask that person in the mirror, why are you doing this to me? And that's where the reason why, I think, comes in again. You have to have a strong reason why. That's going to, get you back in the game, get you back in the fray. Sometimes it's going to hurt. Sometimes you're going to be sore, but you play through that and you get to the other side. And the other point you mentioned about you can finish, perseverance is important, but you also do need to make sure you have the right mentors around, because the one thing that's going to keep you from finishing is if you have your feet moving and they're pointed in the wrong direction. So if you can get someone to make sure that you keep facing the right direction, so as long as your feet are moving, yes, then perseverance will take you through. I've seen so many people who have gone through so many things personally and academically, and earned their doctoral degree. So I wholeheartedly agree with you that you can finish, but not just on you trying. It's also making sure that you got somebody giving you the right direction. Yeah,
I've got a very close friend in Navy SEAL. He always says, "Listen, you might fall to your knees, but never roll onto your back. You're allowed, you're not allowed to go to a knee, but never quit." And the last point really is, to anyone who's thinking of doing it, it is absolutely worth it.
Yes.
I have no doubt in my mind, it's absolutely worth it. So if you're anywhere on the fence thinking about should I and is it worth it, take it from me. You will never regret doing it. You'll have some challenges through it, but when you get it done and move on, you will never regret having done it.
No, there's so many opportunities. I mean, you mentioned what you're doing now is not what you necessarily thought you were going to be doing as a student. I hear it and see it over and over and over again. Don't let your own imagination limit you when you're thinking about your future opportunities, because you'll hear more knocks at the door than you ever imagined possible once you've gotten through this process and finished.
Yeah, and one other thing I think that I think it's really helpful today, particularly today when so many people are influenced by social media or whatever, or trying to follow others, or this is what you should be doing. Mm-hmm. When you do a dissertation, it's you yourself on one thing that you've chosen, and so you're standing out individually as an individual and being unique, and that strength and that confidence will stand you throughout life, because you're not afraid to be who you are and who you want to be, and to be different, not for the sake of it, but you're not afraid to be different. Right. And there's, you should never be. You're, as your mother told you, you're special. You're unique. So, but doing that dissertation gives you that strength of character. And you, while you will do it, and you will have people around you, you're going to do this, and you're going to get it done. So no matter what comes up in life again, okay, well, if I manage to get through this, or get through that, I can get through this.
I had that experience when I was in graduate school with our candidacy exam, which is a very, very difficult, very grueling process. You take a long time to prepare for it, and everybody the faculty beats up on everybody just so that they know that you're not perfect. You're so far from it. And it's a very, very daunting experience. And when I got through that, I honestly think that's the last time I worried about anything in my life. There have been things that I've been concerned about. There are things that take my time and attention that I work on. But that experience really taught me that there's no reason to worry about things. There are things I can do, things I can't. Figure out which one this is and act accordingly. But to worry, I can't get through it or I can't handle it. Once I went through that experience, I just haven't. It was like an epiphany moment. I've never worried about anything since.
No, it does go back to having people that you can trust, that you can check with and ask and make sure that you're on the right path and that you're on the right journey. Because again, there will be rabbit holes. There will be periods of time where you're, and days will go past when you don't feel as though you're getting a lot done. Days will go past when you're not.
Right.
And you need to have people around you to be able to check on them. I call them sheepdogs, people who you can check on, who actually care about you, but know the space and can say, no, it's okay. Take another day if you need it, take it. And sometimes that person has to come and tell you, listen, take the weekend off, leave it alone, and come back to it Monday and we'll start again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, when I say I haven't worried about anything, that doesn't mean I haven't been challenged. I haven't suffered failures and reversals. Those have all happened. But I knew that I could do what it took to overcome that, to keep going, to, that sense of just worry was lifted by accomplishing something that I thought was so difficult, near impossible when I was coming into it. But by actually getting through that process, then I figured I can get through anything else that I need to as well. So I thought that was very, very valuable outcome. So, well, listen, Fergus, let's say that people want to hear more from you. Maybe they want to work with you. They want to get some performance coaching, whatever the case might be. What is the best way for someone to reach out to you, maybe to continue this conversation with you?
Yeah, just my website's probably the easiest, fergusconnolly.com. That's where, my TED Talk, everything. And actually books that I've written, which again, I would never have even thought of writing a book except for having written a dissertation, which is another thing you mentioned earlier. But I think that's another thing that it opens up doors for people who want to write. And in fact, it was only yesterday I was reading a book that was based on a Ph.D. by somebody else, actually a naval officer. But again, there's so many opportunities when you get your dissertation done, if you choose to go that route.
Well, the thing about writing after you finish writing your dissertation is you have to learn how to write again, right? Because no one, even your committee, doesn't want to read your dissertation. They're paid to do it. They have to. But it's not like it's a big page turner or anything. So
no.
So when you're writing for people who get to choose whether to read your book or not, it's a whole different voice that you got to use. And that's one of the things we found when we're working with folks through our Expand Your Authority program. One of the things we got to do is make sure you let them know, okay, it's okay to unbutton the collar and to loosen up a little bit and tell stories and stuff like that. In fact, you have to start doing that now. So
you do. Where I found the value was in the structuring and planning phase, and so then the writing became much easier when it came to that. That was the only new thing I had to add to it. So you're so right. But again, I would never have written a book if I hadn't done a dissertation first.
A lot of things that I know folks would never have thought to do, but you feel you're empowered once you've gone through this. You feel like there's so many other challenges you can take on. So the book, we'll link to your website in our show notes. So fergusconnolly.com. We'll link to that in our show notes. Any other points of contact that you would like to share with folks, or is that going to be the best one?
That's the best one to start.
Awesome. Well, we'll set that up then, and hopefully some folks will reach out to you, maybe continue this conversation, check out the talk, the books, and all of that.
Dr. Strickland, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for joining us, Fergus. I do want to remind everyone that this episode has been brought to you by Dissertation Done. So if you're an adult doctoral student, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com and we'll schedule a conversation and see if we might be able to help you to fast track your dissertation. And if you're someone who is either working in that expert space as a coach, consultant, counselor, or aspires to do so, reach out to us at dissertationdone.book to find out a little bit more about how we can help you become a published author and have people coming to you as the expert because you will have literally written the book on your area of expertise. Dr. Connolly, again, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I had a blast. And for everybody else, go have a great day and go out and live your unconventional life.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.